Okay. Did it stick? How many of you have tried to pick up Undead Unluck and gave up? I almost did. Because to be honest, the start of Undead Unluck is really off-putting with its intense sexual tones and unconsensual touching. But I promise to you, just like what was promised to me, it does get better. And if you don't pick it up again and give it a second chance, I promise you that you're probably missing out on one of the most unique new-gen shonen anime that has presented itself recently. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Animel. If you haven't been here before, I'm Mel, the host of this channel. Undead Unluck is a new anime, not that new, but an anime that was released and started airing in fall 2023 and has continued into winter 2024. There are approximately 19 episodes at the time of filming this, with the promise that there will be 24 episodes. This can only be watched exclusively on Hulu, and it is quite possibly one of the most unique anime/stories that I've watched or read in recent time. If you haven't heard of Undead Unluck before, and you're not reading or following the anime or the manga, Undead Unluck is a romance, but also a battle shonen anime. And we follow these two characters around. They're basically in the title, Undead, who goes by the name of Andy, and Unluck, whose name is Izumo Fuuko, but Fuuko is her first name, as they go on a quest to essentially help Andy end his immortal life. Obviously, that's not the written technical synopsis, but I hope you understand what I mean. If you watched my video that I released last year on anime that catfished me, the initial synopsis for this story is a little bit deceiving because as the story goes on, you come to find out all these different elements. And while this story is centralized around Andy and Fuuko, there is so much more to it. The story eventually evolves kind of in conjunction with Andy trying to find his ultimate end and blissful death, with the act of trying to defeat God, because God is the one that imposed all of these abilities or curses, however you see it, on all of the characters within this story. The characters specifically are known as negators, which is the power system of the Undead Unluck universe. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense as to what's going on within Undead Unluck. And before I dive into all the unique aspects and all the great aspects of Undead Unluck, I must address the big elephant in the room as to why most people end up dropping Undead Unluck in the first few chapters or episodes. At the start of Undead Unluck, when we're first introduced to Andy and Fuuko, Andy realizes that Fuuko has this ability that inherently makes or creates unluckiness for anyone that she touches or touches her. The gravity of that unluckiness increases based on amount of time of touching her bare skin, likability, how much she genuinely likes the other person, and also the intimacy of the touch. We don't know this right away as viewers or readers, but it kind of gets explained in the story as we go along. However, this doesn't excuse Andy's actions. While I inherently understand the power system and what activates Fuuko's ability, and the fact that she doesn't understand how to use her ability, she uses very intimate means to engage it later on in the first few episodes. At the start, Andy gropes her unconsensually multitudes of times, which is a huge turnoff for many viewers, including like myself. And even from my own perspective and view, I was really ready to drop it. But thanks to the support of an Instagram follower and an anime buddy, I kept pushing on. And I will say that it does improve, as I stated in the beginning of the video, around episodes 9 and 10. Or if you're reading it around chapter 20. And the story starts to really get interesting lore-wise by chapter 30, or the most recent arc that's currently airing on Undead Unluck if you're watching it actively, or if you just check the episode list. It's like episode 18, 19. So now, with that being said, hopefully I've gauged your interest just a little bit, but I'll tell you why exactly you're missing out. Once you get past that initial stage, Fuuko really starts to learn her abilities and at some point enters a training arc. But I don't want to give too much away as I am reading the manga, so after this video, if I've convinced you, please go watch the anime or go read the manga and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Or you can hit me up on Instagram at its__animal. Now, here's the most unique aspect about Undead Unluck and what really started to pull me into the story. The first one is the power system. While some out there may think that the power system is kind of confusing, especially since the first negator that we are introduced to is Andy, and yes, it is kind of confusing. Even kind of till this day, it's a little bit confusing. The other abilities of some of the other characters make a lot more sense, and they are very much thoroughly explained. I also will say that I do think that the manga does a better job in explaining things versus the anime, but the anime is clearer in terms of the action scenes just because you're seeing it animated. So there's a little bit of give and take in both, and that's why I'm engaging with both mediums. For the most part, I feel like the power system, while unique, is something that us who live as humans can understand inherently. For example, Fuuko's negative ability is unluck. She negates luck, the concept of luck, which is something that you and I are very familiar with. Same with Andy. He negates death, so he is essentially undead. And there are a bunch of other characters that they introduce, like Juiz. Juiz's negation ability is injustice, so she negates justice, or essentially the view of other people's justices, and reverses it upon them. So it takes something that is very relatable for any type of viewer or audience, because these are all things that we verbally use or engage with in our day-to-day and understand fundamentally. But obviously it's been scaled and has some logic applied to it for the world of Shonen and the world of Undead Unluck. Some other really easy ones that have already been displayed in the anime are untouchable, which is held by Tatiana, which essentially just means she's untouchable. No one can touch her without basically getting hurt or probably dying due to the force field that she contains. Chikara has the ability of unmove, so anything that he looks at will be stripped of their ability to move. So I love the fact that it takes something so simple and creates a power system out of it, all by adding the word un in the beginning of the word. I also love some of the additional intricacies of the power system. Not all users are born with the ability, and when the original person who holds that ability dies, gets randomly passed on to another. So your negation ability can essentially manifest at any time, which ends up creating some of the most tragic stories and backstories of some of the negators within Undead Unluck. And as I mentioned, there is logic and explanation applied, and while some of it is not explained right away, they do take the effort to explain them further as the story goes on, as the characters' impact becomes more important on the story. And seeing as there's actually many characters in Undead Unluck, like the world of One Piece and Bleach, some of the abilities of certain characters will not always get explained right away, and you will have to wait. But I feel that is part of the allure of the story, the mystery, which I guess you could say is number 2 of the positives. Maybe not so unique, but the positives of Undead Unluck. There is definitely a lot of mystery and lore implanted in Undead Unluck. And the first time that I realized this was when Victor, who is Andy's alternate ego, makes himself present in the story. When Victor makes himself present, he is having a conversation with Shen, who is one of the other negators, part of the Union. In this conversation, he asks him, hey, what month and year is this? Shen easily replies that it's August of like 2020 or 2019. But then he asks him, what day of the week is it? And Shen looks at him like, what?
What's the day of the week?
That was the first sign that I thought, holy crap, Victor must be from another time in which days of the week existed. And about 2 to 3 episodes later, luckily they don't wait long to explain to the viewers and the audience that the universe of Undead Unluck is on a time loop. And at least from my perspective, I really love time travel stories when done well. And I feel like Undead Unluck does it in a very interesting way, where there are different time loops and iterations that the universe that they're in has gone through, and only 2 people have the ability to remember it. The lore is also added by the different names that some of the characters get. Obviously, Andy, undead, Fuuko gives him this name, and the words sound very similar. Fuuko is kind of similar to the word unluck in Japanese, which is fun, F-U-U-N, if you spell it out Romanji style. And then there's Juiz. Juiz is a word in Portuguese that kind of means judgment, like having good judgment or justice. So with that being said, Juiz's negation ability is injustice. So I love how the author builds like foreshadowing, if you don't know the negator's ability yet, and lore through the names of certain characters. And while I won't mention any other connections, if you do decide to watch the anime or read the manga, pay very close attention to the names that the characters have been given. While this isn't a apply all, it does apply in some instances, which I found a kind of fun aspect. The overarching story conflict is another part that really drew me in and felt very unique. While it initially starts off with finding Andy, his ultimate death and his ultimate end, it is in connection to killing God. Because once God has been killed, God of the Undead Unluck universe, people known as negators won't harbor these negation abilities. They won't be the vessels of these rules that God has created. So other parts of the story, along with negators, is that the negators negate rules that God has created. These rules, on occasion, will manifest in the form of a Yuma. Now, the anime did not do a good job in explaining what a Yuma is. I had to look it up, and I also read it in the manga, but a Yuma is an unidentified, mysterious animal. And the first Yuma that we're essentially introduced to is spoil. Again, another concept that's very familiar, used in day-to-day vocabulary between you and I, about things that go rotten, like food, well, mostly food, but human bodies too. Is that too dark to say? And they kind of take this and manifest it into a physical being. And it spoils things, for lack of better words. But think about it in this context. Imagine if these rules and these things did not exist, and we lived in the world of Undead Unluck. Imagine if luck did not exist, or death did not exist. And while this is not necessarily a spoiler, in the latest chapter, I believe it is chapter 195, they're fighting against some Yuma that I will not name, so I don't spoil it. But this Yuma is kind of explaining the intentions of God, and that the instillment of these rules have kind of created a behavior amongst humans. I think the easiest example is, what if death did not exist and God did not implement death? People would not have the fear of uncertainty, the fear of the future. Another example is change. In connection to death, more or less, humans would not have to fear what comes next, or the possibility of things changing and what they would have to do when things do change. And you as a viewer may be thinking, wait, but there's got to be some great rules out there. Sometimes the aspect of luck is good. But as explained in this dialogue, and even I had to sit back and think, you know what, there's a pro and con to everything. Luck creates irrational behavior. Think about people who gamble and the concept of being lucky. You start to do things that you probably wouldn't do if you didn't think yourself that you had a chance at something, or you had the ability to be lucky at something. So it's these different fundamental aspects and concepts that we understand and that we interact with and think about on a day-to-day basis that has been added as rules to the universe of Undead Unluck. And it kind of just makes you wonder and challenge your thought process on existence. I think that's why I started to enjoy the show too. And while this is not yet present in the anime, and it may take some time for us to get there, as it takes a couple hundred chapters for us to fully see that Fuuko is actually one of the greatest new-gen female protagonists in battle, action, adventure, anime/manga that I've seen in a while. And I'll take a side step to say that I've been seeing a bit of this like in Dadadan and Akane Banashi. And if you haven't read either of those, please check them out. But warning on Dadadan, if Undead Unluck was difficult for you to get through, Dadadan starts off really, really wacky, but not just wacky, very cringy as well. Oh, and Dadadan is getting an anime this October, so if it's on your list, just a warning. I think Undead Unluck, its start is a little bit less intense compared to Dadadan. Let me just put it that way. However, Fuuko ends up turning into one of the most bamfed characters. She goes from crybaby to bamf. And at that point in the manga, I was like, oh my god, this is great. And granted, Undead Unluck actually has a nice diversity of characters, which ties into another point. Not only is the protagonist, the female protagonist, fantastic, and while her growth does take a long time, which may not be for everyone if you don't have the patience to stick around which is something that you need with Undead Unluck, then maybe this isn't for you. However, Fuuko's growth is fantastic to see, as well as the growth of other characters within the story. The cast is very diverse, and we get to learn the backstories of each and all of these characters in the manga. I do think that the mangaka is doing a good job so far in spacing out the stories and putting more into certain stories over others as to not overwhelm the audience and the reader or the viewer. So with a wide, diverse cast of characters, it kind of gives the audience the ability to anchor themselves to some of their favorite characters, because a small cast of characters that are unlikable makes it really hard for continuous engagement and viewing. But with a wide cast like this, while at times can be harmful, can also be fantastic for the storyline and in pulling in more audience. Obviously, as I mentioned, the intro of Undead Unluck is what's deterring most people, but I'm here to reassure you that if you continue on, I promise it gets better, so much so to the point that that heavy, intense sexual interaction disappears and it almost doesn't exist anymore. It actually doesn't exist at all anymore, to the point that it's like, wow, you start to even wonder, why did it start off this way? Which is a question for another time. But I do enjoy seeing also some of the other female characters like Juiz, very powerful, prominent character who's able to admit her own wrongdoings, her own mistakes, and still be a strong leader and empower her teammates within the union. Well, the last few things that I'll add as to why you should watch Undead Unluck is the messaging. The messaging within Undead Unluck has presented itself currently and will continue to present itself throughout the story in ways of you can't do it alone. And while we're all going through our individual hardships, those hardships can become our strengths. So as for the first part, there is a point in the story that's currently present in the anime, so you could watch it if you do decide to watch it, that two characters or some characters that are normally on the same team are having a conflict in ideals and their visions of justice. Because of this, they end up butting heads when they're actually trying to accomplish the same mission of defeating God. But they want to take completely different approaches, which is delaying and creating a lack of efficiency in them trying to accomplish their mission. With that, it can strongly be said and seen throughout the entire story of Undead Unluck is that things are much better done together as a team. And despite our differences in justices or ideologies, if we're working to accomplish the same goal, like let's hash that out, let's suss that out, because we're better together. And that no one else is weaker than the other necessarily. We all have our own strengths and we're able to all contribute to the same goal in our own ways. And in connection to the second messaging, by using our hardships to be our strength, some people are not as weak as they may seem or as one may perceive based on their own ideals and their own visions of justice, as well as being able to harness the difficulties and the challenges that you've had in life and using them as tools to continue to build yourself up and surpass obstacles that you encounter along the way. It's very simple messaging. I think you see a lot of this in anime at times, but I think it's important to kind of know what you're watching. While anime is fun, and some of them you kind of just watch to just enjoy, you don't really care about what the themes or the messaging is, I do tend to enjoy some anime that have deeper themes or messaging that you can see in them. And at times I do find them more enjoyable, which is why I think Undead Unluck would be a little bit more enjoyable to you as the audience viewer who has yet to see it, if you understand some messaging behind it. And as I've mentioned in other videos, if you've been here before, I tend to love comedy. Undead Unluck does a really good job in planting in that comedy. It's a little bit over the top and exaggerated, but that's what makes it so fun. And they use kind of like fourth wall breaking references. For example, Fuuko's favorite manga is To You From Me, which is basically a parody of a real life manga and story that's called From Me to You. Furthermore, in the latest episode, episode 19, for the sake of the story, Fuuko and team, the Union, decide to create a manga. I mean, that's a really fun way of breaking the fourth wall. And they go to Shueisha to essentially present their manga to them, like it's a one-shot. And I find it always really meta when anime and manga start to talk about the creation of manga and how much work goes into it and how much time artists and mangaka put into their work, or rather how quickly they do it. So it's real fun how they add comedy to diffuse some of the tension within Undead Unluck at times. and add some more lightheartedness so that the viewer can continue to enjoy the story. So hopefully, with all that being said, I hope that I've piqued your interest just a little bit more and piqued your interest again to give Undead Unluck a try. While it is initially really difficult to get through the first few episodes, that quickly dissipates after episode 9 or 10 or chapter 20, whichever form of medium you choose to go with. Thank you at Fool's Gold, who is also on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, for putting me on, but also keeping me on track. With the promise that Undead Unluck was definitely going to get better, I kept pushing on and kept watching through. And I'd also like to thank you for bearing with me through this video. I was sick last week. I had to delay the release of this video and the filming of this video. And as you can hear, my voice is still on the recovery. But I kind of got antsy and I couldn't wait anymore, so here I am filming it. Thank you for tuning in as usual. I really appreciate all the support. For those of you who watched my free run video, oh my god, thank you so much. At the time of filming this, it's almost 3,000 views. It's probably like the highest view video that I have, and it really makes me happy to know that you guys are enjoying some of the analyses that I put out there. If you're currently watching Undead Unluck, please let me know where you're at in the anime or the manga and how you feel about the story overall. And if you do decide to give it another try, I'd love to know what your perspective is the second time around if you make it up until where the anime is right now. And if you do decide to pick up the manga, again, you can hit me up on Instagram. I'd love to chat about it. I'm really enjoying Undead Unluck right now. Aside from everything that I just said, it's really a fun story. It's kind of wacky and I love the dynamics. That's going to do it for me. Thank you for joining as usual. You will catch me next time with my regular voice, hopefully, on the next video and hopefully next week. This has been Mel, the host of Animel, signing off for this week. Bye!